Alright, and welcome into the second episode of Matt Cooks. Today we are making some pizza dough. And one thing that I've discovered trying many different recipes and many different types of pizza doughs, I have found that this one, the secret is using just about as much oil as you use water, and also is using about a quarter of the flour is just cornmeal, and that really just makes the dough. So what we're going to start with is 17 ounces of warm-ish water, and not really warm-ish, I mean just room temperature, slightly lukewarm. We're going to add to that 2 teaspoons of sugar for the yeast, and then we're going to add 3 teaspoons of yeast. All right, 1, 2, and 3. Okay, and then we're going to stir that up. Let the yeast and the sugar work together there, activating that yeast. As we know, the yeast is living, and it is going to get activated so it can work through our dough. Alright, so there it is. That's the water, the sugar, and the yeast. 17 ounces water, 2 teaspoons of sugar, and 3 teaspoons of yeast. Or you can use 1 packet if you want. I think 2 is probably more than you're going to need if you've got your, I'm using the jar here. Definitely at times I've used the packets. 1 packet is probably good. I just kind of add a little bit more to kind of get a little bit more active, a little bit more, the yeast working a little bit more. But we're going to let that sit for about 10 minutes. And as that yeast activates, and so we'll be back after 10 minutes. Okay, so we have now waited about 10 minutes on the yeast. You can see that that is really bubbling up now, and it's active. It is ready for the flour. Now on this one we are going to have, as we already said, 17 ounces water, 2 teaspoons sugar, 3 teaspoons, or if you want to do 1 packet yeast, we've got that. Okay. Now to that we are going to do 5 cups of flour, which we have, and then 1 cup of cornmeal. And then to that we're going to add 3 teaspoons salt, approximately a quarter teaspoon cream of tartar, although I'm just going to kind of sprinkle in some. That's just to soften it up. Cream of tartar is good at softening up anything with flour. And then we're going to add to that 1 cup of vegetable oil. That cornmeal and vegetable oil just really makes for a really good crust. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and add in, don't have to be shy about this. Not going to do this in any sort of breaking it up. So we're going to just go ahead and add in all of our flour. Once again, going with the gold medal flour. There's our cornmeal. We're going to add to that our salt. And to that we're going to add, and like I said, I'm just going to eyeball it, about a quarter teaspoon. Running a little low on the cream of tartar though, but I'm going to do a decent amount there for the cream of tartar. And about a cup of vegetable oil. No reason to be fancy with the olive oil. We'll use some olive oil in the finished product, but since we're just going to add a full cup, we're just going to go with the vegetable oil. It is nothing wrong with that. So we are now going to mix this in. I'm just going to use a regular spoon here. Get that all to come together. And to activate the gluten, you really want to knead it for about 8 to 10 minutes. Now, so we're going to let this sort of come together first so it's not just super messy. this stuff. It comes together pretty well once you've got it mixed in well. Pretty good consistency, pretty easy to handle even from the beginning. And the more you handle it, the easier it becomes throughout. The only thing to mention here is that I guess that you need more than a cup of the vegetable oil. You're going to need, and also the olive oil for eventually for, going to top it off. So you're going to need that, and also the toppings, which I'm just going to kind of leave it up to you. But yeah, it's already kind of coming together pretty well. It's not too sticky. It's decently handleable. And that's coming together pretty nicely. But definitely need to work with it a little bit. And once you start to do that, it will become a pretty cohesive ball of pizza dough. Alright, just a little bit careful with it to start. The cornmeal really gives it a distinct texture. I mean, I made a lot of batches using just regular white flour, but it's just hard for it to not be bready, because you're just basically making glorified bread at that point. And the oil in the cornmeal just gives it a little bit more of a crackly finished product. And it's you can already tell that in the handling. So yeah, it's just, this is a really good mixture because it doesn't take much for it to become pretty handleable. And I actually have to shout out, I got this slightly modified from the channel Binging with Bobbish as far as the ideas. When she makes this as a deep dish, which I don't necessarily think that's even necessary to be that specific with what you're doing. I just like the mixture. But it ends up being a bit of a deep dish style. But I mean, I just think that I don't have a fire oven or a pizza oven, anything to get super high temperature, so this is one that you don't have to cook at a super high temperature, so that can be helpful. It's not one that you have to put in there at 900 degrees or something. We're just going to keep kneading that. And a note on this will make, for me, I make this into three pizzas, which is probably a bit, because it's so heavy with the oil, and it turns out to be a pretty thick dough. I end up, that's about serving of two, so I mean, I don't eat the whole, if you're eating this, that usually can get you a couple of meals. I think half of that is plenty, but you'll see how it turns out. But I split it up into three. I like three because it's about enough to, I guess that's eating a lot of pizzas, but it's one that I don't need to keep in the fridge for over a week. And I don't like to freeze it. I think that, at least I've experienced, you can freeze pizza dough. That's usually how I would typically do it before I did a larger quantity. Would split it into 6 and would freeze most. But if you make it on the day you're going to use it, you can then refrigerate for up to a week. If you want to change up the amounts, it's pretty self-explanatory. You could do half and probably get 2 larger, or no, I guess that would be if you did that, it would be about 1.5, so 2 smaller, but still pretty decent sized. I think if you split it, one would probably be a little bit much. But I guess if you're making it for a larger group, for a few people, if you split this in half, it'd probably make a decent size. I'm going to be cooking in a cast iron skillet, I do have a cast iron skillet, and so that really works pretty well. It's a good thing to cook on. And it is the perfect size for these, and it allows you to, in the skillet it's easy to form the dough around the edges rather than doing it on a pan. But you can play around with the quantities, whatever you feel like. I mean, you could double it, and you could split it. It's really just how much dough you end up wanting. Whether you want to freeze it, make a larger pie for more people. You know, you just kind of have to play around with that. I think pizza dough is a fun thing to play around with. You can play around with how much oil you want to use or how much cornmeal. But I've found that this has been a pretty good mixture. You want to do that for about 8 to 10 minutes. And just as you do it, it becomes a better and better consistency, basically. And really the idea is once it becomes sort of a very light, smooth, easy to form, it's at a good place. And I've learned that this is something that really aids the quality, though, is kneading it enough. But it's also something you can do in stages as you let it sit, and then as it grows, you can continue to knead afterwards. 8 to 10 minutes is a good rule of thumb, but once you feel like you've activated the gluten well. The cornmeal, it's always going to be a bit grainy. You can kind of see as we knead how it's getting a much smoother texture. But this recipe, it's always a bit crumbly just because of that cornmeal. It's always going to be a little bit, kind of breaks a little than pure white flour. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're gonna let that be enough. I don't know how long that quite was, but got a good piece of dough there. Now, the next step here, we get our vegetable oil. And you might choose to use a different pan, but I mean, this stuff comes pretty well off of it anyway, so I'm just going to go ahead and use this one. There's not a lot of residual dough left, or flour or anything. So we're just going to go ahead and coat this pan, makes it efficient. Just enough to kind of get it good and coated. And let's just turn that over. Use that to turn it around. Get it good and coated. Addition more vegetable oil there. Yeah, the vegetable oil is definitely a big part of what makes this so good. Okay. Now we're going to cover that with plastic wrap and or a towel. We're going to let that sit for at least an hour and a half. Another thing that really is something that you really have some discretion on. Just to let it rise. And go ahead and cover that. Just to lock in the moisture. With the remainder, you can refrigerate it and it will continue to rise as well. But an hour and a half is good, and then, but you know, you can just start off as much as you want. If you want 4 hours ahead, that's fine. 4, 5, 6 hours. That's all good. You can allow that to sit there. But we're going to let it sit for about an hour and a half. It's going to about double in size, and we'll be ready for the next step. But there is the basic dough there. Once that's done, we're going to split it up into 3 parts, and then we will form the one we're going to use for tonight's pizza on the cast iron. We're going to let that sit for about an hour and a half, and we'll be back. All right, welcome back. And as you can see, that has really grown in size, so that's a little more than a couple hours it's been growing. So this is our dough after a couple hours. You can see now how you can really get several pies out of this. Okay, so like I said, what I like to do is to split this into thirds, so we'll go ahead and do that. Just a good way to do that. I'm not going to use a scale or anything too complicated. Let's try to get it about into thirds and then try to figure out what's the biggest and move to the others from there to try to get 3 pretty equally sized balls of dough. They're pretty comfortable though. Maybe don't need to do too much. You can see that one's a little bigger. Okay. And this one's still probably maybe the biggest. It's really hard to, that's the smallest though, maybe just a little bit from that one. And alright, I think those are about good. Alright. We'll make this one our tonight's batch, and then I will just illustrate here, getting these in the freezer, or the fridge rather. You know, eating 2 a week, which is now and then half a week, and then a week later, and you got 3, and you don't have to keep them in the fridge for about a week, and you don't have to freeze them. So you could do 2 instead, or even 1, however you want to do it. Okay. Just get these wrapped up. I kind of initially do this because I don't know where it's gonna, how much I really need after they start. They're gonna keep expanding in the fridge, so kind of see how much they're gonna expand, and then I will add some more plastic wrap as I go. But there they are. I might go ahead and wrap these up pretty well. I won't spend too much time on this. This is not really the cooking portion. This is kind of the boring part, but we're going to go ahead and get these wrapped up. Okay, but that's that. If you make 3, that's how you might get those taken care of. Now, for our pizza dough for tonight, like I said, the cast iron works really well. It holds heat very well, so it helps it to cook. It's a good surface if you don't have a pizza stone. And pizza stones can be a lot of work. I had one and it broke. I know that even with taking precautions like leaving it in while it cools, but then you have to let it cool all the way before you can wash it. And even leaving it in, anyways, all I'd say is it's I no longer have it. I went back to the cast iron because it's pretty good. It's just about keeping heat. And this one in particular doesn't really require, like I said, too much heat, but I cook it at 425, so that'll be actually a little preview. It'll be 425 for about 25 minutes. I don't like to overcook things. That's a big thing. I tend to want to, overcooking tends to dry things out, but this is, I think there's so much oil, the oil really helps it to not dry out. But you can see this is already getting to be pretty thick. That's fine. So the next part here though is it's going to want to sit for a minimum of about 30 minutes after you form it here, because then it rests. And right now it's still kind of resistant. It's not very soft. It's kind of dense, and it tends to soften up a bit after it sits for a while. But that's looking pretty good, I think. And this one forms really, really well, and I like this. The cast iron just makes it a really good, where you can, gives it a good surface to press up against, so you don't have to really do too much work in getting that crust to form, and it just ends up being really thick, which, for a more bready dough wouldn't really be very good. The thickness wouldn't really be good. I mean, I don't like it too thin, but if it's too bready, you just kind of feel like you're eating a piece of bread with tomato sauce. But this one, with the olive oil and the cornmeal, it's very crispy, and you really don't mind the thickness. It's just, you can almost eat it by itself. All right, that looks pretty good. That's actually, I think we needed this a good enough amount, because it's definitely very smooth. All right, we're gonna leave that for a while. Actually, I'm going to tonight. You don't have to. I mean, really, about 30 minutes it rests, and it gets really soft and easy to form. It's already pretty easy to form, but that's just a good look at what it's gonna, really how it's gonna end up as far as when you're ready to go. But like I said, I'm gonna let this sit for a while. It's still gonna continue to expand, and it's gonna become very very light, very not too dense, just very airy and crispy. And it's just this dough ends up turning out really well. We're gonna go ahead and cover that, and you can leave it for as long as you need. I'll probably leave it for a couple hours, which is not a bad thing to do. But as little as 30 minutes will probably get you where you want to be. I'm sure if you cooked it now it would be fine as well, but I'm gonna make this in about a couple hours, so we're just gonna leave this out. So when we come back, it'll be at about 2 hours time. Okay, just get this covered. Don't really worry too much about it drying out, but still try to keep in as much of that moisture as we can. Okay, so that's ready to go. I mean, essentially 30 minutes to a number of hours. You can come back and this thing will be ready to dress, and we'll do that, and that is always up to your discretion at that point. But we'll come back and we will finish this thing up, and we'll be back. All right, welcome back. And as you can see, our dough has really just risen like crazy. I think that that amount of yeast is plenty. So I mean, really just using a packet. I used to use a packet for a good bit larger of a batch. So that is plenty of yeast, and that is rising like crazy. So you can see that we've got a very well risen batch of dough there, and the oven is preheating to 425, and that's just really going to give it a lot of levity. I mean, that rising, it's just gonna, the bigger it is, the more air that's in there, the less dense it's going to be, the softer. And this is going to be very just crispy and soft. Very good dough. The dough in particular is good just on its own. I mean, usually the crust is not what you're into the pizza for, but this crust is going to be very good. Okay, now this is the part that makes it good, regardless of how well the dough turns out. I'm one who I'm a vegetarian, so I'm going to no meat, but obviously you can add some whatever kind of meat you want. But I'm a big fan of Alfredo in pizza. Alfredo is just very yummy, so we're going to use some Alfredo. And to pop open though, we use some tomato sauce though for kind of mix it in, but that Alfredo is what's so tasty. But I think that you got to have a little bit of tomato sauce though, because it just doesn't taste pizza-y without a little bit of it. But then the flavor from the Alfredo is so good. All right, now let's spread that out well. And doing it this way, I mean, it's just it forms so well, so you're not going to trap it in there. Now this is going to be a soup. I mean, I have to eat this with a fork because it's going to be, I will admit it's going to be quite thick and not going to be easy to eat this by hand. But that's okay, because that just means it's much better. Okay, so that's pretty good, a good mixture there, the Alfredo and the tomato sauce. Okay, so that's what we're going to do there. And like I said, this is a bonus. I mean, you may want to see how we do this, but obviously dressing the pizza is, however you'd like to do it, whatever toppings you want. I mean, I'm as a vegetarian as I am, it's not a lot of vegetables. This means it's a lot of cheese. So, we're going to, including the Alfredo, so it just means it's very cheesy. Alright, speaking of, now we're going to get to our, just like with our cookies, I like a variety. I like bigger chunks of cheese, and I've really found that this is mozzarella and extra sharp cheddar. I've really found that the fresh mozzarella I'm just not as impressed by. It's a good bit more expensive, but it just isn't that great. It doesn't seem to last as long. So sometimes it ends up going bad before I use all of it. And I just haven't really ever been that impressed with using fresh mozzarella. It looks good, but it's just not necessarily that much better. But, if you do like the fresh mozzarella, that's definitely a way to go. Alright, so we got the cheese there in one layer. Just like with the chocolate chip cookies, we like to have get the chunks of cheese, because those come off of that pizza really, really good. We're going to do also, this is a mixture of Parmesan and We'll do that last. We like to have that Parmesan on top, but we're also going to do shredded cheese, just like this here. Just some shredded sharp cheddar. All right. And like I said, I think that if you don't have I was happy to have this, find this cast iron skillet in the pantry when I started making pizzas. It really works out well. But if you just have a cookie sheet, this is not one that you have to just zap it with that super high heat. Like the Brooklyn style, this is more a slow bake. And so if you just put this on a baking pan, you're fine. I mean, I really like using this cast iron skillet. Works out really well. So if you have that, it's a good option. But if not, I think it'll be just as fine on the cookie sheet. This is the shredded mozzarella. And one thing about the shredded is it's going to be 425 for 25 minutes, and if it allows that cheese to get burnt, one thing that's good burnt is cheese, and I think it'll tends to burn the cheese, gets it a little black, and I think burnt cheese is good. I don't like to burn the crust, I like to burn the cheese though. Alright, so there's our mozzarella. And that's an adequate amount of cheese. It's quite a lot. Alright. Now, oregano. I like to just have some oregano around it. It's a good flavor for it. And you can be pretty liberal with your oregano. Alright. A little pepper I think adds a good kick. And we have some garlic salt. I mean, would definitely be nothing wrong with having some fresh garlic, but I just want to put a little bit. There have been times I've tried to use garlic salt instead of regular salt in the dough, and that didn't really turn out well. It was an interesting experiment, but you can overdo the garlic. I like it just a little splash of the garlic. Now here's the olive oil finally makes its appearance, and we are going to drizzle this along the edges just to give it a nice, just to finish it off in perfection. And some of that's just gonna make its way into the toppings, which is totally fun. Olive oil is a wonderful thing. Okay. All right, there we go. I think that is nicely topped. We're gonna go ahead and get this in the oven. It's gonna be 425, 25 minutes. I've really found that to be good. Like I said, I don't like to overcook things, but I've found that really gets it to its a great crisp level. So we're gonna put it in there for 425 for 25 minutes. All right, and we are now at 25 minutes. So we're gonna go ahead and pop this thing out of the oven. Get a good sense of where it is right out of the oven. And there you have it, our pizza.
Oh, and when we made this episode, we only have one of the non-chocolate, the one that doesn't have chocolate chip cookies, the ones that I eat. We have one more.
Yep, one more left because they were very good. They've been very good throughout the week.
Yeah, they're really good.
All right, but
you guys should check out the last episode if you really want to make this. You guys should.
Yeah, but we're going to dish up some of just the crust to kind of get a taste for the crust, and we will get that plated up. But there is the final product, and we'll be back.
I will eat it.
All right, we are going to give it a try here. You want to?
I'm doing the crust. I don't really like the inside.
Yeah.
I'm gonna try the smallest part.
We're gonna.
And move on to bigger parts.
We're just trying out the crust because we did make the crust.
It's crunchy,
the other
like
stuff,
it should be.
Yeah, very good.
But I was gonna eat that part.
Turned out good. Oh, you want it? Okay. We'll split the remaining parts. But hey, we're just kind of getting the taste test for the crust because that's really what the focus is on.
And
I mean,
then Dad can
cheese and
taste test
Alfredo
the other
sauce is
one.
obviously, we know that's good. So there's no reason to. Do you want any of the rest?
No, you can have those.
Okay. But pretty good.
Yep.
Well, it turned out good. I mean,
Another channel that we both work on that you might want to check out, which is more definitely at the time we're recording this, is more popular than this
right now.
channel. Yeah, for the time we're recording this. You may be watching this and this is more popular than J-Bricks, but do consider watching it. It's actually pretty good. We have some cool channels on there. And I'm pretty sure you'll probably have different seasons than we have right now. Right now on J-Bricks we have what are the seasons we have? And the first one is Ninjago City, and then we had Enter the Digital World, and then we had, what was it again?
But on this though, we'll focus on this since this is the video we're doing.
Revenge of the Snakes.
I will say that I was a little bit worried coming out because 25 you could maybe.
And then Revenge of the Pyro Vipers, and then the Two Blades, and the one we're working on right now is the Prisoners of the Underworld.
Okay, you could maybe pull it out a little early, even 20, anywhere in that range. I mean, it was starting to get a little bit cooked, but I mean, it's just so to get that crispiness. I think just below the surface, that's not. It's not overly cooked. It's not too burnt there, and it's just very crumbly, coming apart. So that's what I'm going to try. So I guess if I were going to,
much easier, right? You could upload 2 videos at once.
So I mean, that would be the finished product. Is this? We get these pieces. It's just streaming off there because that is full of sauce. But that is the finished product. There is the pizza. And we will see you next time. We're going to make tomorrow for the Super Bowl, which it'll probably come out after the Super Bowl, but still make the Super Bowl snacks with some pretzels. So we are going to try to make some homemade pretzels tomorrow.
You guys should we're just going to make that name Super Bowl time pretzels so that you can save it to a playlist that'll be a playlist you can watch during the Super Bowl or something.
All right, we'll see you guys next time.